This is Barbara's Storm at Sea quilt. It's going to feature in issue 2 of Patchwork Poole magazine. Barbara made her quilt using the 1 to 3 method, and now I'm going to show you how it's done. This is a sample that I've prepared. It's a small Storm at Sea sample, and I've divided it into 2 sections. I've gone ahead and quilted it, and on one section I've quilted all the way to the edge, and I've trimmed away the batting and backing so that it's level with the top edge. On my other section here, I haven't quilted all the way to the edge and I've left an open edge. So on this open edge, I've trimmed the batting and backing so that it extends past the top by 1/4 inch. And I'll show you why soon. To join the sections together, put the open section on top of the other section so that you can separate the batting and backing, and you can easily pin one layer of the top section to all 3 layers of the underneath section. That's why I've given it the name, the 1 to 3 method. Now pin together, aligning the seams. To align the seams, place a pin through the seam 1/4 inch away from the raw edge, and then through the next seam underneath, also 1/4 inch away from the edge. Bring the sections together and bring the pin back up to the top. Take your time to pin. Pinning like this will ensure that your seams will line up from section to section. Now we're going to sew along that seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. At the machine I have my 1/4 inch attachment attached onto my walking foot. I have a size 80 quilting needle and a stitch length of 3. And even though I'm piecing, I'm quilting at the same time, and I'm sewing through batting, and that's why I have that larger stitch length of 3. So you can see that the tops are sewn together, and at the moment the batting and backing is loose. At the ironing board, open out to the top and press the seam. You'll see that the seam will automatically want to go to the open edge. Turn the quilt over to the back and overlap the batting over the seam. So the next step is to trim the batting. So use a ruler and just push up against the ridge that's formed by the quilt, and you can mark a line using the ruler, and the next step is to trim on that marked line. To protect the quilt, use the ruler, slip it underneath the batting, and then cut on the marked line. Now you can see that the batting is butting up against the edge of the seam allowance. So the next step is to join the batting onto the edge of the seam allowance, and you can do this with just some nice large loose hand stitches, or you can use a product that's called batting joining tape. So this is just a thin nylon strip, and it has some glue dots on one side. Not to be confused with fusible web, it's a completely different product. So what's going to happen is we're just going to position the batting joining tape just next to the stitching line of the seam, and we're just going to place that on so that it covers both the seam and the batting. And then to protect that nylon tape, we're just going to cover that with the backing fabric, and we're going to use the iron to press. And you can use some steam in the iron when you do press. And it's really important that you don't move on to the next step until you're sure that the batting joining tape has fused those 2 edges together well. Now it's just a matter of folding under the backing fabric so that it meets the stitching line, pinning that in place and slip stitching the edge down. But if you'd like to try a machine sew method, I'll show you how I do that now. Mark a line that's 3/8 inch away from the raw edge of the loose backing fabric. To do this, I'm using a friction marking pen. This will just iron off. Now fold over on the marked line and press. Just go slow so it's nice and accurate, and it's okay to use steam in the iron. We're just folding over on the marked line to conceal the raw edge. Now lay the folded edge over the join to cover the stitching line, and it should cover that stitching line by about 1/8 inch. So let's hold that folded edge in place with some glue, and then we're going to iron to speed up the drying process. Now turn to the front and pin in the ditch of the seam. And then before we sew, flip over and double check that those pins are catching in the folded edge by about 1/8 of an inch. And now let's head to the machine to sew. And now stitch in the ditch of the seam. And here are our two sections joined together. You can see it's lovely and neat on the front, and then on the back, the stitching line that we stitched in the ditch has just caught the edge of the fold on our backing fabric, giving a nice neat finish. So that's the 1 to 3 method of quilt as you go. There is one final step where you just need to quilt the quilting lines across the non-quilted section just to finish the quilt off. If you'd like to make a Storm at Sea quilt, the pattern is available in Pattern Pool magazine issue number 2, available mid-November 2025. And I also have my book, the Quilt-As-You-Go Companion. We'll put all the details, links below so that you can check it out. So thanks for watching everyone. Bye.